It's Super Videos back at you for another video. This is going to be the things you may have missed and Easter eggs video for 707, which was called Sing Me a Song. So there's a lot of cool little details in this episode that I think some people may have missed. Some of them are just interesting, but some are actual hints about what's going to happen in episode 8 at least. So let's get right into this. So the first thing I want to mention is at the beginning of the episode when we see Michonne out on her walk, she comes across the mattresses that are burned, and those mattresses are the exact same ones that the Saviors burned when they visited Alexandria the first time in episode 704, which was called Service. Then the next thing I want to mention, if you remember, before Jesus and Carl ended up in the back of the truck, what Jesus did is trick Gregory and gave away Gregory's liquor, and they put him in the box and put it in this truck to get to Negan. And in this episode, we actually see Jesus cut the bottom of the box. And then later on in the episode where one of the Saviors comes to grab the box, we see all the liquor come crashing down and basically breaking. So Jesus effectively made it so that neither Gregory nor Negan get the liquor. The next thing I want to mention is, if you look at the part with Spencer when he sees this walker trapped by the tree, you see this walker has its guts hanging out. And for comic readers, that's a clear foreshadowing and Easter egg for something that's going to happen later on, and it's probably going to happen in episode 8. So that's a clear foreshadowing for that, and I'm not going to say who it relates to. If you've read the comics, you obviously know, and I think it's very cool that they included this little snippet in there. So next, when Rosita and Eugene are actually talking inside this building where they're going to build the bullets, we see Rosita kind of being really harsh on Eugene and calling him a coward and calling him useless. And if you remember back in season 6 episode 16 when Eugene and Abraham were also here, Abraham also made a similar comment towards Eugene. So that's also very cool as well, and it's interesting how it came full circle. It seems like anyone who enters this room gets the urge to call Eugene whatever they want and call him a coward, which is kind of funny actually. And then right after Carl shoots someone, he comes out and we see him holding this machine gun, and that's taken straight from the comics. For comic readers, you of course know, in the comics that happens in issue 104, and if you take a look at that issue, on the cover they have Carl with the machine gun, and it's really cool because in the comics Carl actually grabs Abraham's machine gun. So this is Abraham's machine gun in the comics, but in the show he ends up taking one of the Savior's machine guns, but it's still the same type of weapon, which is very cool, and it's kind of like a nod to the comics. Then when Negan is kind of talking to Carl when he shoots his men, we actually see him grab one of the Saviors and put him in front of himself. So Negan is basically using the other Savior as a human shield. Then right before we actually go to commercial break, we see the camera kind of pan out and zoom out into the sanctuary and what it looks like. And if you noticed, the walkers that are in front of the sanctuary, they're actually the alarm system that the Saviors use, and they even have these heads on spikes, and this basically goes back to the promotional image they released a while ago. And when this was released, people thought that this was linked with the Whisperers, who are another villain in the comics that come after the Saviors. And then of course in this episode, it's actually clearly revealed that these heads are actually from the sanctuary and not the Whisperers. Then when we actually see the factory or the sanctuary, if you compare it to the sanctuary from the comics, it's like an exact replica. So it's very cool that they actually made it look exactly the same. But what's actually very interesting is that it's actually CGI in the TV show, so they don't actually have this building. Then we have the part where Negan is talking to Sherry. Sherry tells him that what we talk about when you're not here is none of your business, and that's actually the exact same thing Negan tells Daryl when he asks why he brought Carl to the sanctuary. And then right before the ironing scene, we have the Saviors kneel and we have Negan giving this speech. But what's very interesting is that Daryl is also kneeling. So Daryl is kneeling in front of Negan, and this may be the first and only time that Daryl actually kneels to Negan and the Saviors, which is pretty cool. But in this case, he's not actually kneeling to the Saviors, he's just kneeling to Negan. But it's just very cool how they have that in there. And then, of course, the ironing scene, we have the iron, and for those who didn't notice, the iron was actually in the opening credits. So if you look at the opening credits and look at the shot where they have Jeffrey Dean Morgan's name, who of course plays Negan, you see the end of the bat, which is Lucille, and you also see in the background the furnace and the iron. So they kind of hinted at that in the opening credits. For comic readers, we caught that immediately, but it's actually very cool to see it come to play. And then, right after Negan irons Mark's face, he tells Daryl to clean it up, kind of whispers in his ears, and the significance of that is basically Negan trying to show Daryl who is boss, and kind of in front of Carl especially, showing Carl that I control everyone, even Daryl, who was a soldier for you guys. So it's very interesting how they have that in there, and what kind of tactics Negan is using to manipulate people and to control them. And then there's this one piece of information that wasn't really revealed here, but we can actually find if we put two and two together. The doctor at the sanctuary is called Dr. Carson's, and the doctor at the hilltop was also called Dr. Carson's. And that's not a coincidence. These two people are brothers, so both brothers are doctors, and one of the brothers is working with the Saviors. And that may not even be the case. The Saviors and Negan may have forced one of the doctors to kind of come out of the hilltop and join them at the sanctuary and help them there. Because he's a doctor, he's very valuable, so they actually probably did that. So it's cool how we have one doctor working for the survivors at the hilltop and one doctor working for the enemy, for the sanctuary, for the Saviors, which is very cool. And then right before we leave the sanctuary, we have this shot where we see Jesus on top of the truck, and this probably would be weird if it was the first time we saw it, but it's not, because if you remember, back in season 6 episode 10, which was called The Next World, we actually see Jesus pull a similar stunt when Daryl and Rick are driving the truck in that episode. So it's not the first time we're seeing Jesus do this. And then the next thing that's kind of linked to this is when we have Dwight kind of pulling Daryl and moving him to his box, we have Daryl looking up at the top of the truck. And that kind of hints at Daryl actually seeing Jesus. So it's very interesting, because if Daryl did see Jesus and Jesus is around, he could end up finding Daryl or waiting for Daryl or something so that he could help him escape. Now, the person who left the note for Daryl is probably not Jesus, because there's a lot of plot holes that way. We have to think about how he got in and things like that. That was probably either Dwight or Sherry, but I think Jesus is gonna have a big role in helping Daryl escape once he's outside the sanctuary. But it's very cool that they actually have this subtle thing in there for us to see. Then someone giving the note to Daryl. Like I said, it's probably either Dwight or Sherry. But what's interesting is that the note, of course, says "go now," which is basically saying that you can go and you won't be detected. On the back, we have a key, which is probably the key to one of the motorcycles there, and we have a match. Now, I'm not sure what the match means, but it may probably be linked to burning the place or something like that. Of course, in this specific episode, we have the ironing scene, so we have the burning that way, and of course, that is also linked to Dwight. And then having that in there kind of links them together. And of course, we know that Dwight and Sherry were smoking previously, and they probably had matches as well. So it makes the most sense for one of them to be helping Daryl. But of course, he's gonna escape and use that key to get into one of the motorcycles and drive off. And like I said, meet up with Jesus once he's out, and then Jesus can help him actually get out of that vicinity. But there's also another thing that comes into play. It's whether this is a test or not. Of course, we had that once, so it doesn't make sense for them to do that twice. So it's probably the real deal, not a test. And then at the end of the episode, when we have Carl and Negan back at Alexandria when they return, and what I actually noticed is that Carl still doesn't have his bandage. So Carl is not wearing his bandage at all when he's back at Alexandria, which is kind of cool to see. In this specific scene when Negan is talking to Olivia, we have Olivia slapping Negan. And if you watch Talking Dead, you know that the actress playing Olivia actually slapped Jeffrey Dean Morgan pretty hard. And when we have Negan kind of taken back a bit and surprised, Jeffrey Dean Morgan was also a bit surprised as well. And then the other thing I want to mention, right before Negan finds Judith, he's about to go to the room, and then Carl lies to him and says that there's something else in there, which is cool because we see Carl is still protective of the family he has and people at Alexandria. And then right before Negan grabs Judith, right before he actually gives Carl Lucille the baseball bat, if you take a look, you can see Negan has a knife at his side, which is very cool because for comic readers, you know what that's linked to. And it's kind of cool how you can put two and two together like that, especially with the thing I mentioned earlier. I'm not going to say what it is because then if you don't know about it, it's going to be spoiled for you. But if you're a comic reader, you know what I'm talking about right now, and you know what I'm linking it to. And I'm very excited to see if this actually plays out in the next episode or not. I'm pretty sure it will. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll be back for another video.